joined now by Cal Thirumalai. Cal, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so my question is about the research that you've been doing in the Gulf of Mexico and the poster that you're going to be you're a co-author on, and I guess you're co-presenting. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're looking for and what that research involves?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to share. I'll just preface by saying that this is actually a poster that's being presented by a student at the University of Louisiana at Lafayette, and her name is Gracie Babineau, and she's done the majority of the work on this poster. But basically, this work is focusing on trying to understand the ancient history of methane seeping out from marine sediments, basically. So at the bottom of the seafloor, we're trying to track how much methane actually was sort of expelled from these sediments, and how much methane actually was released going back thousands and 10,000s of years ago, basically.
Okay, and the goal with this is to, what are you trying to understand by tracking this methane?
So methane is an extremely potent greenhouse gas, and we're really concerned about rising levels of methane in the atmosphere. And there are points in Earth's history where we think that methane may have actually played an important role in global warming events. So what we're really trying to do is trying to understand the history of methane release from seafloor methane hydrates and methane vents, basically.
Okay, and how does what you're finding in these sediment layers, these cores, how does that apply to what's happening with the climate now?
So one potential kind of concern, although there are many ideas that say that this is not something that's an imminent worry, but we know from Earth's geological past that during global warming events, the ocean heats up so much that some of the bottom layers can actually warm up and destabilize these methane hydrates. Okay, so the concern is that, can this even be a possibility with anthropogenic global warming? Is it possible that we can warm up the Earth so much that the oceans heat up so much that these methane hydrates ultimately get destabilized and you release more methane into the atmosphere? So we're trying to investigate whether these things can actually happen and how these things actually change going back in time throughout Earth's history, basically.
Okay, so a lot of this methane then is trapped at the moment because it is so cold, because so the cold mud then, or the sediments trap that stuff. As it gets warmer, it can seep out, rises up through the ocean, gets burped out into the
That's perfect.
into
Yeah.
the air,
Yeah.
and then that just accelerates the
global warming
process.
That's exactly right. You described it really well. Yeah.
How do you know at what point, how will you figure out if this is actually happening?
So the first aspect, and that's really what we're delving into in this poster essentially, is can we actually track these things? We're trying to ground truth whether we can actually characterize the history of methane release from these locations where today we know there is methane seeping out today from these locations, okay? And so we're really trying to track their history of these vents that are today releasing some amount of methane, but could they have released at different rates back in time? And the way that we're trying to do this is by using these tiny little ocean bugs known as foraminifera. And in particular, we're focusing on benthic foraminifera. Benthic just means that they live at the bottom of the seafloor. And these foraminifera are basically living on top or within the mud that houses these stable methane hydrates and is the site of sort of methane seepage today. So we're trying to track whether the foraminiferal shells that they build, whether they can actually hold some types of signatures of methane release. And then we can go back in time because we find these shells in the sediment layers that allow us to go back in time.
And then that also sort of allows us to potentially predict the future a little bit here.
It definitely allows us to understand the system better, and that makes the system more predictable for the future. We're actually analyzing individual shells of these foraminifera. These are really, really tiny shells. And we're analyzing multiple individual shells from the same sedimentary layers. And so the real cool thing is that the lifespan of one of these individuals, of these benthic foraminifera, is probably, we think maybe a month, maybe a couple months, maybe a year. Some people have said they can live as long as a year. So what we're analyzing is individual months or years by characterizing the isotopic signatures in these foraminifera. So we're getting a kind of a monthly view into thousands and tens of thousands of years ago.
Thirumalai, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you very much.